Hello. So this is the narrated portion of the grade retention PowerPoint. Let me go ahead and pull that up too, and we'll see. Okay. So grade retention, it means not passing to the next grade. This is something that I learned nothing about. I'll just be really honest with you. When I was an undergraduate, we never talked about it in class. Okay. I just assumed I was going to come out of school and I was just going to do such a great job that there wouldn't be anybody in my classroom who wouldn't pass. Okay, so much for that pipe dream, because that didn't happen. About 3/4 of the way through my first year of teaching first grade, I went to my mentor teacher who'd been doing it forever. I think it was her 30th year in the classroom. And I said, I just don't know what's wrong with me. I have these 3 children who they can't read anything. And so she just looked at me and smiled, and she said, well, I guess they'll have to take first grade over. And I was stunned. And she said, this happens in every class. She says, I have 3 or 4 that I'm not going to pass either. And the lady down the hall, we had 4 first grade teachers. The lady down the hall is not going to pass all her kids either. She said, we have enough held back every year that we actually have a class that's, that we could form if we wanted to, that was all children that were held back. That's not how they did it. They put them all in different classrooms. We didn't have the same teacher 2 years in a row, but that was the only thing they did for them. Anyway, so long story short, I said, oh, so that's what you do when children aren't successful. I had no idea. And so I got my materials together. I got the grade retention form. I called mom and dad in for a conference. We discussed it. And they said, okay, I guess if you think that's what we need to do, we'll do it. And so they signed, and it happened. And a couple of years went by. And then one day I was having lunch in the teacher's lounge, and you know how all conversations happen in that teacher lounge, some good, not so great. Anyway, so I just happened to visit with one of the 4th grade ladies who was having lunch. And I said, oh, do you have such and such in your class? She said, yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. And there's just something about the way she said that. I said, well, isn't he doing just a great job this year? And she said, well, honestly, he's not. He's been suspended for such and such, and I'm having to write him up every other day for something, and it's just been horrible. And I was stunned, because that child I had retained. He had been in first grade the second year, and I'd gone to the teacher next door and visited with him all the time, and he was just the sweetest little guy. And he did so well in his second year in first grade. He learned how to read, and it was just wonderful. I thought retaining was just the best thing ever. So it just planted a little seed in my brain. At the time, I was working I was also going to school for my master's in early childhood, and I was working on some research projects. And so I just kept thinking, maybe this is something I need to research, but I did a little quiet research on my own. So then I would ask other 4th and 5th grade teachers if they had any children that I had previously retained in their classroom. And a lot of them said yes. And one of them had just had one of the students expelled, bringing a weapon to school. Someone else had, been suspended for fighting. It was over and over and over. All I got was negative feedback. And I said, well, how are they doing academically? Horrible, just horrible. I've had to take them to the team to see about testing, so on and so forth. So all of a sudden, my previous notion that this was just such a great positive thing, holding children back for the extra year, sort of got a little tarnished, and I was a little worried. So that's when I started researching. This became a real huge project for me. I actually did my graduate research on this when I was working on my doctorate. So anyhow, I did work up a questionnaire for early childhood teachers. And the numbers that you see at the top of the page are the numbers of the questionnaire that they also answered. So you'll see that as we go along, because I'm kind of going to cover these areas, and maybe you can clear up some misconceptions you have as well. So when I talk about grade retention, I just want you to know it is repeating a grade that the child has already completed. So there you go. And it's most often you retain children, either they have academic difficulties, and it's 99% of it is reading. And then the other very small number is immaturity, quote unquote. And I say quote unquote because there's no real definition. So number one, the first prompt that was on the teacher's questionnaire that answered this, and there were hundreds of teachers that answered this, said grade retention provides children an opportunity to raise their current level of academic achievement, current level. And this was true. It really does. I'm trying to find my answers. And they did show marked improvement. Sorry, they showed marked improvement in their grades and test scores in the next year. So what I had seen in the year following mine was true. They do better the second year. Well, for heaven's sakes, they should be doing better because they've already had that stuff. They're just rehashing what they saw last year. Okay. But when you look at academic achievement, there's a real slippery slope to it. When I asked teachers in face-to-face interviews, which I also had face-to-face interviews, well, what is academic achievement? I had some say it's below grade level work. Some people just said it's incomplete classroom work. Others said difficulty with reading, which that kind of made sense to me. Difficulty writing within the lines. I mean, we're talking about those composition paper lines. You know, not every 6-year-old is going to have the fine motor coordination to stay in between those lines, but I'm just saying. Difficulty with sight words, well, that would be many, many first graders. And letter and number reversals. Let me just tell you, that does not mean a child needs to be retained, because letter and number reversals are normal development until second grade. Bear that in mind. My next prompt was, grade retention provides children an opportunity to prevent future academic failure. And they answered that on a Likert scale. Strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree, or neutral. So grade retention provides children an opportunity to prevent future academic failure was one of those that most of the teachers agreed on. Yes, they did have that first shot of improvement. However, those gains gradually diminished within 2 years. All the research I did showed that there was just a steady downhill trend. In fact, out of 54 out of 63 studies comparing retained students to equally low performing but promoted students said that there were overall negative effects. And there were only 9 studies that showed short-term positive academic results, which lessened over time. But unfortunately, they have that quick burst of improvement and then slowly go back down. Now, I'm not saying this is 100% of the time. There's always that 1% that just does great. But don't be led to believe that's the norm. If I were to send students with low academic performance to the next grade level, their teachers may form a low opinion of my teaching abilities. Now, let's be honest. We all want people to think we're great and we're doing a wonderful job as a teacher. Especially when I was a new teacher, I was really concerned that people would think I didn't know what I was doing. Nowadays, I don't worry so much anymore. But, you know, back then I was young and worried. So when I asked people this in an interview, I got some responses. I'll let you read those on your own. This is what a teacher asked me. I'll let you guess what I said. Retention injures children's self-esteem. Well, all I can tell you is that it does. A group of sixth graders who named retention as the single most stressful event in their lives, even more stressful than losing a parent. And very young children, I'm sure you've heard this from some, if you work in an elementary school, they'll say, I'm in second grade, but I should be in third grade. There's always the I should be that accompanies whatever grade they're in. It's a stigma. Some children view it as punishment for not being good enough in class. They're frightened. Some children are as frightened of grade retention as they would be losing bowel or bladder control in the classroom, which is really embarrassing. Retention is most effective when it takes place in kindergarten or first grade. This is a widely held belief. It's absolutely not true, but it's widely held. Research data tells us that even the early retentions produce the exact same negative effects as later retentions. And later retentions are very negative, but so are the early ones. Retention is an effective intervention strategy for boys and girls. Even though you will see that boys are retained twice as often as girls, but it's not effective for either one. Retained students are more likely to exhibit behavior problems than non-retained classmates. This is an absolute. You will have more behavior problems. Why? Because they are anxious, they are embarrassed, they feel like the teacher doesn't support them, the teacher punished them, the teacher doesn't like them, and they begin to dislike school. And you can read through that. Retention allows English language learners additional opportunities to master language skills and academic material. They have the exact same problems that native English speakers have. And let's see, retention provides immature children an opportunity to catch up to their peers. This is, I just cannot stand when teachers recommend it on account of immaturity. Because what is immaturity? It's all the lens that you look through. What looks immature to me may not look immature to you at all, or vice versa. It's like my husband and I, we'll be out to dinner, we'll be in a restaurant and then walk to our car after, and he'll say, oh, so nice and quiet out here. Do you hear those children screaming at the table next to us? Well, I didn't hear a thing. See, because I've been in the classroom so long that loud children, I just filter that out and continue talking. I don't notice it. He, on the other hand, he's been a professor a lot longer than I have, and he's used to a nice, quiet classroom. So he notices those kinds of things. He's never taught kids. Okay, so when you look at immaturity, I asked the teachers I interviewed to tell me, well, what does an immature child do or look like that would cause you to label the child immature? Well, first thing is, does not follow instructions. Well, that would have been my whole first grade class every year. Frequently gets out of chair again, really? Talks too much. Have you seen an early childhood person that doesn't talk too much? Very few of them. Is unable to sit crisscross applesauce. Oh my. Is inattentive, throws things, and plays with hair. You mean like this? Okay, now we know. So immaturity it's all the lens through which you view the world. So immaturity to me is not a good reason to retain anybody. Retention is my only alternative when students do not successfully master grade level material by the end of the school year. No, that's not true. That is not true. You can have that child put on the list for testing. You can put that child's name on the list for tutoring. You can put that child's name on the list for before and after school programs. You can notify the parents of what the summer programs that are available. You can provide parent education by sending home things for them to read with the child, and, you know, maybe a little bit of information on the importance. Retained students are more likely to drop out of school. Yes. In fact, in a study that was done in Texas, it turned out that they were 5 times more likely to drop out of school before they graduated than those who hadn't been retained. And in addition, just a little bit extra here, African-American students are retained twice as often as white students. So think about that. Just a little information, never say never. Sometimes it's the only choice. When students have missed more than half the school year due to illness, and you know, this happens now and then, you'll have a child in your classroom who has leukemia or something awful like that. And they're gone so much, to them, they've never been there long enough to associate themselves with being in first grade or second grade or third grade or kindergarten. For them, there's not that stigma that, oh, I wasn't good, I have to repeat it. They don't have that. When students have moved so many times in one school year, they have never gotten the whole curriculum. They just haven't put the pictures together. You know, and I've had kids that went to a different school every month, no kidding. So how do you ever learn anything when you're so disjointed? And I always say parents know their child best. If the parent's absolutely convinced that that's going to be the best thing for their child, and they're willing to support the child in that endeavor, that's fine. But you've got to have parents that really buy in. And I like this. You know, they're going to forget all those things you said, you know, about this is a noun and that's a verb and this is an adjective. They'll never remember you're the one that said that, but they will remember how you made them feel. And that is my deal on grade retention. Avoid it at all costs if you possibly can. How's that in a nutshell? I hope you have a wonderful day. If you have any questions, please let me know.